On March 26, Meta's own Oversight Board ruled that a community note system, the thing that replaced professional fact-checkers across Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, is not a substitute for fact-checking and could pose, in their words, significant human rights risks if rolled out globally. Meta has roughly 3 billion monthly users. The system they switched to, modeled on the one X uses, was studied by NewsGuard during the Gaza war. 68% of the most engaged posts spreading the most common false claims got no community note at all. The platforms know this. They published it anyway. That isn't a story about social media. It's the same story playing out in money and politics at the same time, and most people are trying to live through it without a frame for what's actually happening. The frame is this: the shared rulebook that ran the world from roughly 1991 to 2008 is gone. We're not living in chaos. We're living in something stranger. And there are 3 things you can actually do about it. For about 17 years, from the collapse of the Soviet Union to the 2008 financial crisis, most of the world ran on one playbook. The Associated Press said something happened. The major networks confirmed it. The encyclopedia recorded it. You and your brother-in-law might have fought at a family barbecue about what to do about it, but you both agreed it had happened. That world is over. Now you pull up a Reuters article at the barbecue, your brother-in-law pulls up a podcast, and within 90 seconds you're not arguing about the news anymore. You're arguing about whether Reuters is a real source or whether his podcast guy is. You leave angry. He leaves angry. Nothing got settled. By the end, you weren't even talking about the news. You were talking about whether his sources are real or your sources are real. That's the whole shift in one barbecue. The machinery that produced the shared rulebook has fragmented into competing systems, and each one has its own way of deciding what's true, what counts as money, and who gets to make the rules. Your brother-in-law isn't crazy. He's getting his information from a completely different system than you are. I want to walk through 3 places this is happening: information, money, politics, using specific cases from the last 90 days. Then I want to give you 3 things to actually do, because frame without action is just anxiety with a vocabulary. A piece of research from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, published in February, named the problem cleanly. Community notes requires agreement from users who normally disagree before a note becomes visible. Sounds reasonable. The catch is that the most consequential false claims are exactly the ones partisans will refuse to agree on. So the system filters out the easy stuff and leaves the hard stuff alone. Meanwhile, Wikipedia lost 1.1 billion visits a month between 2022 and 2025. People aren't going to the encyclopedia, they're asking ChatGPT, which was trained partly on the encyclopedia, but no longer shows them the citations or the people arguing in the talk pages. The system was designed to need consensus on exactly the questions where consensus was already impossible, which is why your brother-in-law at the barbecue isn't being unreasonable in his own world. His world was built by a system that quietly stopped flagging the hard claims. Yours was built by a system that's losing its audience. You are both just reading what your machinery hands you. The machinery just isn't the same machinery anymore. Same pattern in money. In the last week of March, Indian refiners started settling Russian oil purchases in Chinese yuan and UAE dirhams, no dollars in the loop. Iran started charging yuan-denominated transit tolls for tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That's roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. The platform handling this is called mBridge. It's processed about $55 billion in payments, and 95% of those transactions are in digital yuan, not dollars. There used to be one referee for international payments, the dollar SWIFT system, and now there's a parallel one. They overlap, they compete. Neither one is going away. They aren't arguing with the ref anymore. They just left the stadium and started their own league. This one feels further from the barbecue than the truth fight does, but it lands on the same table eventually. The price of the gas you drove there on, the cost of what's on the grill, the value of what's in your retirement account, all of it gets priced inside one of those two systems. You and your brother-in-law are both going to feel this. You just disagree about who caused it. Politics is the third one, and it's where the brother-in-law thing peaks. The same event, a court ruling, an economic indicator, gets reported through completely different sources. One side reads the wire services and the academic stuff. The other side listens to podcasts and Substacks and reads documents posted directly online. They aren't just reaching different conclusions, they're using different methods to decide what counts as evidence in the first place. Pew Research has tracked this for a decade. In their polarization studies, consistent conservatives and consistent liberals share almost no overlap in the news outlets they trust. Each side trusts the outlets the other side actively distrusts. That's not partisan tilt. That's two different ways of deciding what's real, running in parallel inside the same country. These three things, information, money, politics, aren't separate fragmentations. They're one fragmentation showing up in three places. They were coupled in the old system. History has actually run this way before. The Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 ended 100 years of religious war by agreeing that different states could have different theologies but would share rules about war and diplomacy. We have a modern version of this too. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviets pointed nuclear weapons at each other, but they fully agreed on the international air traffic control protocols. They hated each other, and they shared rules to keep their planes from colliding over neutral airspace. That's the model. Not one truth, but agreed upon ways of operating despite hating each other. We don't have that yet for information or money. We are in the part before that, where the systems are still trying to win. But one thing makes our situation different from any of these. In 1648, if the rules in Bavaria diverged from the rules in France, a peasant in Bavaria barely felt it. In our world, the rules can diverge between Beijing and Washington, and a small business owner in Ohio feels it within a quarter. We have multipolar rules running on a unipolar infrastructure. That's the part without precedent. The fragmentation has historical parallels. The forced global exposure to all the fragments at once does not. Three things to actually do. Not life advice, just the moves that work in this kind of world. 1. Build your own way of checking things, on purpose. Stop letting the algorithm chew your food. Pick 3 sources that don't agree with each other and don't have the same incentives. Say, a wire service, a specialist publication, and a primary document repository. If all 3 converge, the claim is probably solid. If they diverge, that's the signal to slow down. 2. Hold options across regimes. Don't bet your entire financial life, professional life, or social life on one rule set continuing the way it's been running. Keep some skills, some savings, and some relationships outside the dominant system you live in. 3. Stay in conversation with people who disagree with you. Yes, I know, it sucks. It's exhausting. The temptation right now is to cut off everyone whose information sources don't match yours. But there's no off-ramp. You can't exit the global financial system or the global information ecosystem. The people who can stay in real conversation across that line, building local resilience inside global exposure, are about to be disproportionately valuable. Not because they convince anyone, but because they keep the channels open that the systems are trying to close. That third one is the brother-in-law one. You are not going to convert him. He is not going to convert you. The point is to stay at the table. The era we're living wasn't the normal era. It was a brief window between the fall of the Soviet Union and the 2008 financial crisis. Most of human history has run more like what we are entering now, with parallel systems competing and sometimes negotiating shared rules. But the part that's actually new, the part we have to build for, not borrow from history, is that we're the first generation living through this kind of fragmentation, while every system that affects us remains globally connected. The village isn't a buffer anymore. There isn't a village. The people who do well in the next decade aren't going to be the ones waiting for the old system to come back. The question isn't how to force your brother-in-law to listen to your referee. The question is what you build and who you build it with while the whistles are still being argued over.